tell any secrets of the Mau Mau, this oath will kill me. If I am called in the night and refuse to come, this oath will kill me. If I see anyone steal white man's property, I must help him. I must hide what he gives me and say nothing, or this oath will kill me.
The whole system in this country, the economic system, is such that jobs are scarce. Automation is limiting jobs. It's decreasing jobs. And as automation eliminates the job opportunities, legislation will not create job opportunities. All it will do is bring about friction and hostility between the two races.
You see, there will be no progressive revival if black folks are not deeply involved in it.
I will obey all orders of the Mau Mau, or this oath will kill me.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another monthly edition of the Mau Mau Hour, which usually features my homie, my co-host, my dog, the man of the Mau Mau Hour, the Pascal Robert. But Brother Robert is taking this time off to prepare himself for the live event June 8th, DC. And if you don't know about that, you should, because June 8th in Washington, D.C., we'll be doing Beyond the Black Jacobins, CLR James and the Struggle for Socialism in America with Adolph Reed, Pascal Robert, Vanessa Willis, Billy Bunton, hosted by me and featuring the current Mau Mau chairman, C. Derick Varn. Instead of not doing a show tonight or maybe playing an old Mau Mau, I hit up Derick and I said, Derick, what if we open up the phone lines and you can just holler at folks? Derick was like, okay.
That's about right.
I'm down. Originally, Pascal wanted to have you on the Mau Mau. Had he contacted you already about that?
Yeah, he had.
And then he was like, I don't know, man. I just need to get ready for this CLR James thing. I was like, okay, I get it. Gotta do your homework. You know, just be prepared. But Varn was like, I'm ready. Even when he logged on, I thought he was going to give me the cordial hello. He just game face. So,
speaking of prep,
you've been getting ready yourself.
Yeah. Like 6 CLR James books right there, plus 2 on my Kindle. I got to get through by next Saturday.
Dude, yeah, it's crazy. And I've just found out that when I get back from the airport, I have to get in my vehicle and then start driving north to the Bay Area because my 5-year-old is graduating from kindergarten to first grade.
Nah, that's
don't want to miss that.
Something.
Yeah, it may seem insignificant, but I'm pretty stoked for it. Sean King converted to Islam, somebody said in the chat. Did Derick Varn convert to Islam? I don't think so. Not yet. It's in the works. Someone says the lighting on Pascal is too bright, or is his image overexposed? Another thing we're working on for the DC show is live streaming it for people. So I'm actually pretty stoked for that. That if you can't make it, we should have a link up. We'll have that all ready and tested by next week. So DC show will be off the fucking chain. I'm really stoked for that. That being said, Derick, is there anything that you're angry about and would like to get off your chest to get people excited to call in to tell you no, you're wrong?
I don't have anything particularly strong. I mean, we live in a time period where let's see. What's going on? Netanyahu cried crocodile tears over how bad stuff was at Rafah today, to kind of distract from the fact that he was leading his normal march towards ethnic cleansing. But got mad at Biden for not criticizing the ICC. I guess there's that. And global news. The Democrats look to be losing hands over foot nationally, although recent polls have RFK Jr. up to like 10% of the vote. So who the fuck knows what that means? And the DSA is running out of money. And let's see what else. None of us have made enough money off podcasting to move to Silver Lake. That's what I got.
Is that what happens if the windfall of cash was to come to you? You're like, fuck this Utah shit and move straight.
No, I'd probably stay in. I'd probably move. What I'd probably do is buy like 40 acres in Wyoming and buy a bunch of guns. Like, I'm not gonna lie, is what I'd probably do.
You recently rejoined the Twitters.
Oh, fuck me. I did, because it's hard. So many people are like, if you want to book me, contact me on Twitter. And I'm like, fuck, get a real piece of communication. So I rejoined. And within 48 hours of rejoining, some motherfucker had me copyright struck. So
why do you think that is? Did you say something about their mother, or?
No, I was just going through the history of multipolarity, and people don't want to do that. So
what don't they like about your take on multipolarity besides it being DEI for empire?
I mean, I don't even call it that. I mean, my take is just a factual claim that it's an analysis sector that was come up by neo-realists, particularly C.H. Carr and Hans Morgenthau, for the British and American government, and at the end of World War II, as a way to analyze the situation in global geopolitics. There were several different schools of neo-realists, and I don't want to go into all that, but basically, neo-realist is our classical realism emerged in the late 1940s. It was a way to analyze competing major powers. Multipolarity was talked about by Hans Morgenthau as kind of the national condition of states prior to World War I. And that might be more stable for a bipolar order because there's less of a chance of direct conflict and more of a chance of proxy wars, which is also the case in a bipolar world. And in a unipolar world, there's just one hegemonic dominator. And that's all I pointed out. And I talked about, the other parts of Dugan's politics and I got copyright struck for that. So we'll see.
Is there a love of this idea of Putin and China being the solution to American hegemony?
Well, I mean, in what way is it a solution? Like the reason why America is declining has to do with the internal basket caseness of the United States itself. I mean, it doesn't so much have to do. Yes, these other powers are rising up pretty quickly, but you're still dealing in the case of Putin's Russia with an economy that's smaller than Canada's. It's more coherent than it was before sanctions, but sanctions always tend to make people invest in domestic industry. That's what it does. And as in all autarkic terms at economism, it tends to be good in the beginning and flag off pretty significantly over time. But it never does what liberals say it's going to do, which is destabilize the regime. If anything, it does the opposite. It stabilizes the regime. So, it's a dumb thing to support, no matter how you feel about the war. And honestly, a lot of people confuse being the good guy in one specific instance, or at least the not bad guy in one specific instance, with being like historically progressive. And I think you can make a kind of historical progressive argument for China in some small way. It's a harder thing to do with post-Soviet Russia. But there's just people want their Cold War back because it's an easier set of calculations to figure out who you're going to support in any given thing. But one of the reasons why, say, Pan-Africanists might be interested in multipolarity is because this idea that you'd have multiple poles to play off of each other, since none of the major poles are near Africa, particularly since Europe is a lot weaker than it used to be, and that's really the more direct overhead threat to Africa, literally right over them, as the dangly bits off Asia tend to be. Whereas if you can, leverage China against the US and the US against this or that, you got some more room for internal development. But again, that's based off of early 20th century notions of internal development that misses that new developments in technology tend to be hyper automated, super centralized, and don't benefit as many people as terms of either workflows or countries that can do that kind of production on the global market, as was possible 150 years ago. So you don't need a lot of redundant nodes of production. The other thing is you can't have full decoupling with any one of these empires because nobody has all they need to run the technology they need to run the empires, and that includes lithium, rare minerals, etc., and they're spread out all over the world. The U.S. has plenty. It doesn't want to valorize them though, because it ironically, we have a lot of environmental protections that slow that accumulation down, that China is willing to not waive. I mean, China is doing a lot of its own green development, but it's not like ignore that. But it has less protections on stuff like getting various permits and stuff for internal mining, etc. So it's just, we have ironically a more state overhead government and procedures policies than China does for the same kind of thing. It's hard to say, like, so when people confuse like that, which is a rational choice for state actors in Africa, versus like who we as leftists should cheerlead for, those are entirely different questions. And also, like, there's a reason why people who want to establish other empires oppose the current hegemonic empire. Like, that's a pretty fucking obvious why that would be the case. That does not mean that they are against imperialism itself, and that's something that people very much need to deal with. However, getting mad about multipolarity is like getting mad about rain. When people ask me, why am I against multipolarity? I laugh at them because it's just an objective descriptor of the way the empires are currently aligned. You have you have a cluster of regional hegemons that are unfortunately right by each other. They're giant states, India, China, Russia. And then you have the United States and basically the North American superstate, if you incorporate Mexico and Canada into that. And as much as the economies are interconnected these days, they might as well be incorporated into that equation. And then you have Africa, which does not have a singular dominant power to represent it. So it's kind of a free-floating node. It's the United States does not seem particularly interested in the economic development or benefits of Africa. It only seems to be interested in it in military terms, leaving most of the Euro domination of Africa primarily to the French and the EU, which are increasingly weak. So this is where we are today. The European economic model was largely based off German growth, and Germany's become a basket case since the Russia-Ukraine war. So it's hard to say where that's going to go in the future. Yeah, someone said Nigeria is probably the strongest economy in Africa. Well, the capitals of Nigeria are. I would say Nigeria is fairly strong. South Africa is not awful. Egypt and there's a few economic nodes in North Africa, but again, you don't have anything that can compete with like a Western power or even most of the BRICS. So there we go.
Why don't people ever want to challenge you on any of this stuff, Derick Varn, when they have an opportunity to call in directly? It's almost like they hide behind their keyboards like cowards. And when they have the opportunity to actually call in, there's a number on the screen. You can call in. Use your little cell phone device. They don't want to do it. Why do you think they're scared of you, Derick?
I don't think they're scared.
You sure? Because this feels like fear. This feels like cowardly fear.
I'm used to calling the audience cowards, but I don't see a whole lot of cowardness today.
Someone says, just let you say something about archaeology.
I don't talk much about archaeology. My training's in anthropology and in English, so I don't go up on talking about archaeology all that much. Let's see. There's some interesting comments. Congo's going to be the most populous country in Africa, like in 50 years. It's sort of interesting to think about. Yeah, it's also if it remains one country. So it's going to be interesting to see where that all goes. I mean, one of the things we have to look at is all the major powers have declining populations. Africa's population is on the increase, and it's slowed. It's slowed dramatically, actually, but it's still on the increase. Whereas, like in India, is on the increase too, but I think it's predicted not to be pretty soon. But China, Japan, Europe, most of North America, outside of I even think Mexico slowed down significantly, are all going to go through population transitions. I don't think these population transitions are necessarily super bad, even.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are really worried about them. I actually think, it might be good not to have as many people to feed without a catastrophe or a war just thinning out the numbers. Not that there aren't plenty of wars and plenty of catastrophes going on, but we often have to deal with scale. Varn,
we have a caller. Dun, dun, dun. Are you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They say they're a long-time listener, first-time caller, so let's get this right. Calling from a 330 area code. Caller, what is your name and where are you calling from?
It's Nicholas Kiersey here. Derick and I go back a ways. So
hey!
He knows me and I know him. Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Good.
It's nice to be with you guys. I was just listening to the sort of challenges, the gauntlets being thrown down at a rate of knots, the accusations of cowardliness. Like, okay, someone's got to call. So, anyway, how are you guys doing this evening?
I'm doing good.
Pretty well.
I'm trying to do my best pro wrestling manager right now. I'm wearing, you can't see it, I'm wearing my Ric Flair. I'm wearing my Ric Flair t-shirt, so I'm doing my best pro wrestling promo pitch. Call in because you're terrified of the hammer that's coming down on you. So let's hear it, Nicholas.
Yeah, well, I'm. It's a hammer. I think the hammer's going to be coming at me in a minute, probably. But obviously, I will say I've actually been really, really curious to hear Derick's take on sort of the general milieu of the moment, and there's actually not a lot I think I sort of disagree with at the moment. But let me just make sure that I understand the general assertion would be that we shouldn't be too keen on multipolarity right now. Would that be a
well, I wouldn't say too keen. I think it just multipolarity means what we make of it. But by a weakening of one hegemon, what that actually means as far as everything else is going to depend. So when people say, "Oh, multipolarity is the answer," to me, that's like confusing a description with a solution to something. But it's not. I wouldn't say I oppose multipolarity at all, or that that's even an inaccurate way of describing the situation. The United States itself seems to be torn, if you look at the various military sources right now on how it's going to respond to this. But there's definitely a school that just thinks we need the Hadrians wall everything up. There's a school around the Mersheimers that think we need to lean into some kind of solidarity with Russia to peel them off of any kind of union with China, so the U.S. could pursue either further isolation and or I don't know, direct war. I mean, depends on Mersheimer can be pretty fucking blunt on what he thinks we should do there. I don't see that as a very clear possibility, but it does seem like there's a whole lot of the fucking Republican military establishment that's on that side, and then there's also your standard neoconservative offensive realists who are just pissed off about multipolarity and are struggling to reassert American dominance any way they know how. They don't, however, seem to be as strong in military planning as they once were. But again, who knows? Like, it's not like it's not like we have a good pulse on what's actually being discussed in the Pentagon.
Yeah, I think the deposing of Victoria Nuland is an interesting case point there. But so maybe the neocons are not as all pervasive as they once were. Although I do think, in some sense, the kind of bar or the general sentiment among U.S. foreign policy planners, certainly in the Biden administration, has shifted very much kind of instinctively into their column anyway. So it's like we don't really need neocons right now so much. When we have the Biden administration so jumped up on Russia stuff for the last 10 years, so sort of instinctively scared of a undermining of the liberal international order, which actually conveniently is a nice segue to my provocation or question for you today or this evening, Derick, depending on your time zone. But the rules-based order, the liberal international order, obviously there's kind of conspiratorial ways of framing this, but I think it's a fairly reliable concept. There's a sort of a rich complex of international institutions underwritten by the United States since the end of the Second World War. And I suppose insofar as the United States has always sort of maintained its hegemony, those institutions have remained strong. There were debates, and forgive me, I just kind of set this up a little bit. I might go on for a minute or two. If I'm going on too long, you guys just shut me the hell up.
You're fine. You're fine.
But there were already debates even in the 1970s about whether these institutions would sustain themselves even in the wake of a withdrawal or a relative decline of U.S. hegemony, the defeat in Vietnam, the ending of the Bretton Woods systems, the Nixon coming off the gold standard, the oil shocks, all these sort of events through the 1970s occasioned a very sort of big debate about the idea of sunken cost with these institutions. The United States taxpayers kind of went to the hill to set them up and underwrote them with American sovereign will and treasure. But the world had benefited so much from having them now that, it didn't matter if the United States withdrew a little bit. If the United States stepped back, these institutions would kind of sustain themselves because there were relative gains to be achieved, or absolute gains maybe to be achieved through remaining involved in this kind of system. I suppose people would invoke kind of, John Locke and things like this here. We don't need a world government so much when you can kind of domesticate international space through elaborating these rules and frameworks that benefit everyone. Most states want to be left alone most of the time. And if these basic rules and frameworks exist and there's ways to resolve their disputes, then, what's the problem? And of course, many people spoke to the expansion of the democratic peace hypothesis around this time as well, this kind of fulfillment of the Kantian ideal that, democracies don't go to war. And the real threat here is kind of an early version of what eventually becomes Fukuyama's hypothesis, which is the end of history. But today, it kind of just seems like the discourse has shifted so much, and everyone's worried about it all of a sudden, that maybe the international order is unraveling. I myself, and Derick, you and I have talked about this at length before. I kind of came up through college reading a lot of Hart and Negri, and if people listening to this know much about them, they may be a sort of bit discredited nowadays, or their star has fallen. But what they were kind of saying once upon a time as sort of Marxists, I suppose, was that world order would endure kind of without any hegemonic center. It sounds a little bit like what the liberals were saying in the 1970s, right? But this time, of course, it's kind of this kind of Kautsky ultra-capitalist kind of idea where capitalism is kind of broken free of the need for having sort of a sovereign center, and we're enmeshed in this thing now. There's no going back. And of course, I think just before I got on the phone here, I was hearing you say, Derick, that with our codependency or interdependency on things like the location of minerals for cell phones and various forms of production. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine multipolarity really becoming anything like. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, it's sort of hard to imagine going back to, a beggar thy neighbor, late 19th century version of international relations, where you really did have inter-imperial rivalry and things like that. So the situation today is complex, and I think I agree with you. I wonder though, like, with the rise of these states, what chance, and this is the question, I suppose, what chance is there that they actually sort of collectively together will end up embodying something like the promise of the international order? That the United States has kind of failed in a sense that all of this is kind of happening because the United States cannot, and this is very Chomsky, and I will grant it, in his most recent book with, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's kind of this idea of the sort of the dying Leviathan, kind of not going gently into the dark night. It doesn't, the United States will not cede power easily, even though according to its own theoretical framework from the 1970s, that was the plan. That what we're seeing now is kind of the death throes of the hegemon. Is there a possibility, in your view, that Hart and Negri's empire might yet be kind of fulfilled? It just won't be through the auspices of the United States. It'll be through something that we'll call multipolarity, but correctly, you're calling this out and saying it's not really going to be multipolarity at the end of the day. That's impossible. But it will be something like a rearticulation of the centers of power that the true liberal order is in the offing. It just won't be created or brought into existence by the people that we thought would bring it into existence. I just wanted to throw that to you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Nicholas.
Yeah. So to answer that,
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure hearing from you, Nicholas. There's a lot to parse there. What I would say is that it's going to depend on who gets shut out in these realignments, because the obvious realignments like BRICS all have problems. And the problem with BRICS is that India and China are political rivals in their sphere of influence in Southeast Asia. While they're both fairly aligned to the economic goals of Russia, and they don't want Western incursion on Russia because it would imply Russian incursion on themselves, they don't get along themselves very well. And so you have India in some way is already doing what I would be talking about, playing poles against each other. So India, for example, tends to have good relationships with the United States, cooperate with the U.S. on military drills and stuff out in Southeast Asia, but tends to push back when NATO gets too up into Russia's business. And so they kind of swing back and forth there. I do think, however, there are other institutions arising. If I was going to fault anything, I tend to be a slight Chinese defensist, but if I was going to fault China for one of many things, it would be not establishing its own international. I know why hasn't, and it hasn't for diplomatic reasons, for kind of abandoning that vision and respecting national autonomy, which China itself felt like it often wasn't well, I shouldn't just say China itself. The the Communist Party of China itself has often felt like it was not given proper respect and deference in the Comintern. So they have not reestablished that. It looked like the kind of Marshall Plan on crack that the Belt and Road Initiative was planning to do before the Russia-Ukraine war and the Sri Lankan economic crisis was trying to weaken the blue water trade. Because one of the things that you said, Nicholas, that I think is actually really key that a lot of people miss is the rules-based international order has almost fallen apart every 20 years since the end of the Vietnam War. And if anything did a ton of damage to it, it was the shift in the aughts during the War on Terror to, for the U.S. itself to buck the institutions it built in order to be able to do whatever fuck it wants in the Middle East. And that was the beginning of the end, in my opinion. I think the rules-based international order is like just a joke. I do think there's a lot of, however, people, particularly on the liberal establishment side, who really want this to be invested in and maintained by the United States and Europe. Europe's relevance to all that seems a little bit harder for me to gauge, given, like I said, that the economic powerhouse of Germany's kind of gone on the fridge for a while. It's none of this has gone the way any one particular group has predicted it. So I think what's gonna happen. I mean, if I was gonna hazard a guess, and I'm in less in the prediction mode than I used to be, because the world has so many moving factors these days, where the grooves of international this or that have kind of started to shake up. So it's a lot harder to predict based off priors. But I would say the United States is likely to overstep itself someplace in the next 5 or 10 years. In some severe way, probably involving some kind of hubris with China, hopefully when it does not lead to a war directly. And that will either force a faction of the U.S. policymakers to come to the table and play ball with treating these, new poles of influence more seriously, which that could be bad for the international left. I mean, it might be good for world stability. It's hard to say. Or things could really fly off the rails and you can have a world war, or, and I almost think this is the most likely outcome. American internal incoherence can accelerate the process. So it's not so much that there's like these major rising powers, as much as there is a total decline in United States political coherence internally. And who knows what that leads to on the international stage. I mean, the weird thing about the United States is, if I was going to pick anyone who's geographically well suited to handle decoupling, Fortress North America would be it. Relative food independence, relative energy independence, et cetera, integrated with both your neighbors, non-hostile relations. But both this need for raw materials, and particularly stuff like lithium and the other rare minerals, and also as the United States, even more than Britain, for example, seem to be going through this inability to domestically deal with what is just a decline from a peak, but even on like world historical scales, it's not that big of a decline. So like the U.S. empire is declining, because it can't really boss people around anymore. But like, and American wealth is declining in some very real senses, and it's being more and more centralized and hoarded. But in another sense, it's like what's happening to the U.S., even in the scales of like declining empires, is actually not as bad as what you would see in other historical examples, like in the British Empire went out with World War I and World War II. And even though it won in quotation marks, Russia won with a little bit of U.S. help. World War II, it didn't get to even have a say in how it dismantled its empire. So it's going to be interesting in where that is. It's hard to know, like, the other thing that we're seeing is a lot of the low-hanging fruit in energy and international development. The Chinese have kind of leapfrogged off of prior development, which is fine. That's how this stuff works. The United States leapfrogged off of British and European development. Nothing abnormal or unusual there. But it seems like the ability to find new cheap energy sources and new cheap food sources are to continually pour hydrocarbons onto the ground to get more stuff out of the soil. That stuff seems to be of less and less efficacy. And so it's hard to know what new industry is going to grow any of these in a capitalist developmental scheme. Now, I think our imagination has to think outside of the capitalistic, because a lot of the reasons why this is a problem is you have a constant profit churns in capital, and you need to exhaust resources to provide new commodities to replace old ones, or you start getting a declining rate of profits to kick in, even in an even more accelerated manner. So you have a bigger and bigger exhaustion of resources. It's going to largely depend on what people do as these energy stores start to get a little bit more complicated. I'm not predicting even as anything as severe as the degrowthists are predicting, but I do think it's going to be some real interesting limits. We've seen where all the world economy seem to be slowing down. And unlike in 2007, China is not in the position to soak up a whole lot of the world developmental needs in the same way. So it's going to be interesting to see where this all goes. I know that doesn't directly answer your question as to whether or not this leads to something like empire. I think, one of the interesting things about Hart and Negri's empire, and then I'll take any new calls, is that Hart and Negri's empire, to me, I don't think it's totally, I don't like their political answers to it, but I don't think their analysis is totally wrong. Like, I think Lenin's right about the way imperialism works in the early 20th century, because there's not literal weapons that lead to mutually assured destruction involved, which once you have those involved, the Trotskyite super imperialism, where direct conflict between the imperialist powers becomes too dangerous to happen, does seem to be kind of the status quo. And that seems to be what Hart and Negri are describing. So, but I was recently reading Hart, who wants to pick this back up and talk about what this new international war state really is about, and trying to understand like what kind of international order all these proxy wars are leading to. He wrote something very interesting in the New Left Review, I think, in the last few months about this. I'm going to cover it on my channel with another Italian scholar, not Negri, because obviously Negri can't anymore. All right, so there we go. There's that answer.
All right, that wasn't a long question or answer, but seriously, we have a couple more calls here. I think we have a new caller here calling from a 929 area code. Caller, what is your name and what would you like to spar with Varn about?
Hello, this is Connor from Queens, 718, of course. What's up, everybody? So yeah, first of all, like, big fan of Varn. Glad to have you on, of course. But no, especially because you're just knowledgeable about the economy. And yeah, so broadly speaking, my question is this. Why aren't we in a recession? Which might sound vulgar. Of course, I don't want a recession. But in 2022, everybody, the hate, the screen gets hazy. Like in 2022, the general consensus to most every economist was it's in the mail. In 2023, there's going to be a recession. And for sure, this was informed by like increasing interest rates, and since then, there has not been a recession. And more than that, it doesn't seem as though that increasing interest rates have had the intended effect, which is primarily to reduce inflation. So, as a layperson, it seems as though mainstream economists don't know what they're talking about, and the actions of the Fed in regards to inflation are ineffectual. So again, as a layperson, it's like I'm left wondering if anybody knows like what is happening with the economy. So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if this is like too general a question, but I'm sure like Varn has some thoughts on this. And yeah, maybe if I could like maybe refine this question a little bit in kind of like the Fed's language. Why aren't we in a recession? Well, are we approaching the much talked about quote unquote soft landing? So I hope that makes sense.
So there's a lot to talk about there. I'm not in the business of predicting the next big economic crisis, although I think the contraction created by COVID actually bought the United States a lot of time. What we have seen is two major worrying economic indicators. One, that there's going to be an industrial real estate fallout. And it's weird because you're living at a time of like private real estate, because it's being treated as an investment mechanism now. It's kind of at an all-time boom, but industrial and commercial real estate's about to completely collapse. We've seen business bankruptcies go up worldwide, not just in the U.S., but across the board. The U.S. business bankruptcies are actually a little bit behind. One of the things that I would say, even though there has been a, quote, decrease in the money supply, the Fed's theory originally for why raising the interest rate would reduce recession is it would take money out of the general economy and lead people to save because the payout on the interest and the savings would be high. That's the idea. But people don't have enough money to save. So what's happened in the last 2 years is we've seen a massive, absolutely fucking massive expansion of private credit, probably to offset the fact that there hasn't been that much expansion of government credit. Democrats tend to actually shrink the amount of money in the economy because they're always worried about being accused of being tax and spend liberals. So they tend to actually be somewhat careful on spending. They drop payouts. They've been dropping payouts, for example, to Medicaid and Medicare. The soft landing was the idea that when that theory on savings failed, and it hasn't been true, that's the classical theory, they replaced it with what's called class conflict theory of inflation, which is you shrink the money supply by causing unemployment, that you want an unemployment rate of about 5 or 6%. The problem that you have right now for that, even if that was true, the United States population is declining and the number of people who can work is declining because of the insane cost of childcare, in addition to retirees leaving after COVID, and just, I don't know, 1 million people died, without a war. So plus we're about to hit a population bomb anyway, in that the baby boomers are going to start passing more and more. They're no longer the biggest generation. In fact, I think in the last 2 years, millennials are now the biggest generation. As baby boomers start to die. So if you were trying to instigate unemployment by shrinking the labor supply, the problem is we have too many things that are essential to services and whatnot to be done that are needed to be done to shrink the labor pool much more when it's already shrinking on its own. So you can't like engineer unemployment to do that when you have less and less workers anyway, when there's more people leaving work than coming in to replace them. Now, are we at the edge of a recession? I mean, the indicators is that there might be a global recession coming, but again, it hasn't really happened. A lot of things have happened. Military industrial development has actually stabilized Russian industry. We have seen a massive decline massive decline. It's an inability for the CPC to hit its target growth numbers, and for the United States GDP to, at least on paper, have a growth rate higher than that of China for a little while, which is kind of unheard of. There has been relative decoupling between China and the U.S., instigated not by China, but largely actually by the U.S. itself. And that's been replaced largely by trade with Mexico. However, so that means the U.S. is no longer the buyer of last resort of a lot of the world's commodities. All these things could trip off at any minute, and there's a lot of fragility in the economy, but it doesn't really look like what might happen in the, say, aughts or even the 80s recessions. It looks a lot more like the 70s stagflation period, where people might have plenty of employment, the economy looks good on paper in a macroeconomic sense, but in a microeconomic sense, you have more and more people working more and more jobs if they can work at all, or you have people purchasing less and less over time, but because there's still investment purchasing and all that, it's not showing up in GDP. I suspect we see a lot of that already, because a lot of these credit lines that people have been depending on, they've just beginning to max out. It's getting harder and harder for people to get private credit, and that's been a lot of how people have been surviving the past 3 years. We saw a down payment of credit of debt during the beginnings of the recession. All that's been undone. I mean, not the recession, excuse me, the beginnings of COVID, which was a recession, but you know, it was so fast, it's hard to actually even see it as a recession. But as that dries up, it's hard to see what's going to happen, and we've already started seeing a lot of monetary flows out. One thing I'd like to point out, though, about like the idea that raising interest rates sucks money out of the economy. Well, the thing is, those interest rates do eventually have to pay out. So while they might temporarily actually drive down the money supply, and MMTers will say it doesn't, they calculate the money supply differently. They actually calculate the money supply by debt. That it's a different way than the Fed actually calculates it. But if let me actually think about what I'm trying to articulate here exactly to you. If we see a bunch of debt instruments explode, or you see a sector of the economy take a real big hit, it could actually trigger things, because things are pretty fragile. And we've already talked about the relative indebtedness of individuals in the United States. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. Connor, thank you so much for the call. We have some more calls, Varn. Calling from a 919 area code. Caller, what is your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, my name is Keon Hafezi, and I'm calling from North Carolina.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Yeah. I've been listening to Varn since 2018, 2019. I just saw this come on my YouTube. If I had more time, I'd like to have more important, interesting questions that I would have wanted to ask. But I saw this, and I was like, okay, let me shoot one of the probably least interesting things and discuss that. So, as a millennial, I think around 2007, 2008, 2009, one of the things that got me and my peers into, well, I don't want to say the only thing, but one of the things that sort of had a cathartic, I don't know how to say it, effect on my sort of view on politics was a documentary series called the Zeitgeist movement, which was, very popular for the moment. It was very interesting. The first one was sort of conspiratorial, but the second one was second one and third one were very interesting for the time. And it was like, and as I have also kept up with that, with the thinker and the presenter of those ideas, I found that their material, their framework is not Marxist, but they are very much working on a train of thought that is a materialist, that's materialist oriented, and if not allied, at least very parallel to our Marxist aims and socialist aims. I want to see what Varn thinks about that, and what is his view, and
Your view on Zeitgeist, Varn?
I'm also very unconcise. I'm a very unconcise speaker.
It's okay.
Thank you for the call, brother.
Yeah, thanks for the call.
Thank you.
So I'm very familiar with the Zeitgeist movement. It's a movement that was founded roughly after a documentary in 2008 by this guy named Peter Joseph. Peter Joseph has ties to the Technocracy Inc. movement. Technocracy Inc. was this idea that we need to get politics out of the management of human beings. We also need to replace capitalism with energy accounting. They base their initial schemas on how to do this basically off of proto-cybernetic theories plus trying to figure out a currency not based on accumulation of value, as in capitalism, or labor, as in labor tokens, as proposed by Marx in Critique of the Goethe Program, but as in energy accounting, so that you could have managed a kind of managed economy that was critical of market capitalism. There's still markets in it, but the currency is not based off of it's supposed to be based off of the development of energy. So you want your energy outputs and energy inputs to be roughly equal. So it's a no growth, no degrowth economy. These ideas were worked out in the 1930s and 1940s and 1950s. They were kind of seen as a development to and an alternative to Marxism. Initially, they were pretty hostile to Marxism. Today, it's because all these movements have kind of lost their historical impetus, including the Zeitgeist movement, because the Zeitgeist movement was popularized, out of largely actually, documentaries and stuff around conspiracy culture, if I'm quite honest, in the mid-aughts. And they're trying to resurrect these ideas the way that, say, like Marxist Leninists today are trying to resurrect ideas about the Soviet Union. There's a lot of interesting and strange stuff in the Zeitgeist movement. So the Zeitgeist movement was largely influenced by Lyndon LaRouche, everyone's favorite ex-Trotskyite turned weird conspiracy theorist who also blames most everything on the British. And by the British, he really probably means Jews. Including a lot of slander against Marx in some of his later writings. LaRouche even had influence in the Bush administration and led all kinds of wild stuff. Zeitgeist has moved away from that, moved away from their LaRouche ties. So, that's really where they are today. They've also kind of distanced themselves from Alex Jones, which they were kind of more copacetic with back when they were linked with the Beanish Project. Which is kind of where the Zeitgeist movement broke from itself. And the Venus Project, that's the intermediary thing that was picking up from Technocracy Inc. But in a real sense, what they wanted to do was incorporate ideas from like Buckminster Fuller and Technocracy Inc., and modern cybernetic theory around Stafford Beer and even what happened in Chile, and come up with a kind of socialist alternative to Marxism that was like bright green futurist, but no growth. And that's kind of where they still come from. I would say, yes, they have a materialist orientation, but it's a different kind of materialism than Marxism. And you'd have to be pretty deep into both to know that. They also, I just want to point that out. Like they made their hay. The founder of the Venus movement was a member of the Young Communist League, and then got kicked out because he questioned Marx, and he thought that Marx's valorization of labor itself was was a problem and was part, one of the people who thought focusing on labor and labor value was a mistake, and he thought we should focus, on energy and energy accountants and energy accountancy and redesign all of our cities and all of our polities to face off that. There's some other stuff in the Zeitgeist movement. There's a hostility to politics in general, so that they basically think society should be run by engineers. But that element of Technocracy Inc. and even of the Venus Project has been kind of downplayed in the Zeitgeist movement because it's kind of scary. For me, it's hard to know where they would be today. I mean, I would say that they're probably on the broad speaking populist left. They have distanced themselves from a lot of the more extreme stuff in the Venus Project. But their ties to conspiracy theories and to New Age spirituality comes up a lot. They often get compared to apocalyptic cults, I think somewhat unfairly. And they have been criticized for throwing in stuff that was related to, anti-Semitic and far-right conspiracism, which they themselves didn't believe, but they were willing to pick up that language to pick up recruits. So, make of that what you will. Are they this, could we see them as allies? I don't know that they're a big enough group for it to matter one way or the other, if I'm quite honest. But if it inspired you to look at materialism, I would just tell you to dig into the history of that group more and really dig into what they have to say, because I think you realize that some of it is not copacetic with general leftism. Some of it is, and you can take of that what you will. I'm not here to enforce any orthodoxy on anybody.
Well, you're heating up the phone lines. We have another call calling from a 704 area code. Caller, what is your name and where are you calling from?
Hey everyone, it's on your left. How's it going?
Fuck yeah, flash from the past. Hope all is well.
Yeah, I've been heads down in work and been trying to catch the replays. But yeah, no, Varn, I just always appreciate your level-headed take on things. And so I figure I could drop this and see kind of what you think about it. So I work in finance, I work in tech, work with AI. I've been incredibly amazed at how resilient the economy is. And, there's sort of this, and there was this doomsday prediction for a while, right? That the U.S. empire is crumbling. And so, ineffectual, nothing can happen. And yet, even though that's true, we're dysfunctional, whatever, I feel like the U.S. is actually reasserting its role in a lot of ways in the global economy, in very subtle ways. I think about all the sort of consolidation that's happening in the financial services industry, everything from asset management, banking, payments moving towards more real-time, higher liquidity models. And really what it strikes me as is that there's really a consolidation going on where large firms are able to capture more market share with better margins. And that seems to be what's kind of propelling things forward. And there's sort of a cosmopolitan character to U.S. companies that sort of makes the U.S. a place kind of stay very relevant. China is sort of having its own issues and seems to be backing off in a lot of places. And so to me, it seems like we may actually see, and also in terms of the economy is doing great on a lot of indicators. It doesn't feel that way because inflation is very psychologically jarring and there's this sort of K distribution where at the bottom you still get railed. But in terms of kind of aggregate economy, it's pretty resilient, pretty strong. And so I'm just like seeing this scenario where regardless of whatever happens, the elections or anything, like the U.S. seems to really be reasserting itself in a very stable state, and we might not be as tenuous of a position as it seems. And obviously, a war could pop off, nuclear war could pop off, whatever. But short of that, it kind of actually feels like we're getting to more of a stable state than a decayed state. And I wanted to see what you had thoughts on that.
Thank you very much for the phone call.
So, one, empires decay over the course of centuries. The British Empire started decaying in around 1860. It's, I just want to point that out. So when people talk about this, both critics and fans of the U.S. tend to have way too narrow of a time frame. Furthermore, while we're doing relatively well, we're still not doing anything like we were in the 90s or in the 70s. But we do see increasing ability for the market to catch all kinds of things. One thing that you've seen is there is a kind of return to internal development in the United States, both in firms and in governmental policy. In the beginning, that's going to lead to a lot of aggregate benefit to the economy. But when I say aggregate, that's important. When people call me and talk to me about the way they perceive the economy, I think we should be very careful about this, because we are often talking about macroeconomics and then trying to deduce down from macroeconomics to microeconomics. And that is a fundamental mistake. You cannot part the whole like that. Period. End of discussion. You cannot deduce from the state of the macroeconomy where we're talking about GDP aggregate to the microeconomy. Because one thing that we can see is the stagnation of the U.S. middle class continues. In fact, the only real growth in wages was at the bottom end, and inflation has actually chopped up a lot of the middle in the United States. So a lot of there is a very real sense in which frankly, generally the base of both parties is feeling it harder than people who are at the bottom end of the economy, who frankly generally aren't political subjects in voting anyway, even in the best of years. And they're also not, elites. A lot of people on the left actually are tied to relatively elite situations, and I think we do need to just deal with that. However, I agree with you that the economy is actually doing way better than you would think, given all the political instability we see in the United States. We're in a weird situation where if you thought, when you go, it's the economy stupid, you're both right and wrong. The American political incoherence is not tied up into our economic state at the moment, because our economic state is pretty coherent. What the danger here is, as things realign, what's it going to do? The one thing I would say is that we also tend to view empire and capital's relation to empire as a national project, and we probably shouldn't do that. There's a way in which these multinational companies are actually bigger than the United States government. Since most of the political levers that leftists have tend to be methodologically nationalist, we tend to view this in nationalist ways. And it's a problem when we look at capital adjusting coherently. And since capital is very much located in the US, European capital has been weakening, both on the continent and whatever the fuck is going on with Britain. Brexit seems to have spun the British economy into something like free fall. And that free fall is very, very real. So a lot of what's happening in the US is a lot of the things that were priorly taken up by Britain and Germany are just being taken up by us directly. Furthermore, a lot of our internal demand can go back into our own economy. In fact, our biggest trading partners are next door. And so a lot of that money is now staying in circulation here. I think in the wrong one, however, that's not going to always save you, because I want to get the simplest way to explain it is basically the laws of entropy will eventually kick in if you have a closed economy. But I do think we underestimate capital consistently in its ability to find new niche markets. Leftists have often been fighting the wrong battle. Leftists right now are obsessed with neoliberalism and want to bring Fordist developmental policies back, while there's all kinds of new kind of developmental policies that don't look either like Fordist or neoliberal ones. And again, the owl of Minerva flies at dawn and shits on our head. So our predictions of an imminent recession have just generally been wrong. And that's why I haven't, I pushed some after some of my fears after after COVID, but it doesn't look like we're the people largely eating those economic changes. It looks like Europe and to some degree even China is eating those economic changes. It's also not hurting Russia. But I've been kind of mad that like we haven't been holding not just mainstream economists, but left economists accountable for not being correct on this stuff. You know, I can't tell you how many different left-wing economists have told me that we're on the brink of not just a recession, but a major collapse, and that's just not happening. So I do think that if anything, and I think a lot of what you're talking about, I don't want to say that I'm neither positive nor negative about this. I also just think capital, the assumption that the stats manifested in national capital, discussion and what international and national capital does somehow ties into the political project or the political hegemony is just a fundamental mistake. But one thing I think you might be noticing is America might be deciding that soft power is easier to pull than hard power after years of hard power failure. But again, I'm not quite sure what that means because we also aren't seeing a whole lot of new investment everywhere.
All right. I hope that answers that question. We have some more calls. Are you still ready, Varn? Can you still do some more? Are you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm here for a while. I gotta go host graduation tomorrow and read graduate names, but that didn't happen until 8:00 at night. So I got plenty of time.
Okay, let's go. Calling from an 847 area code caller. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Tim, and I'm in Chicago.
Hell yeah. That's all I got.
All right, cool. I think actually a friend of mine was on your show a while ago, Jason.
Who?
Jerry, the house musician.
Oh,
Jerry?
shit. Yes. Yes.
Anyways.
Love those shows.
That is a fun side note. So yeah, my sort of question was, Varn, long-time listener, first-time caller. I think your analysis, complexity theory-wise, climate change-wise, falling rate of profit, always feels pretty accurate relative to what I know. I'm sort of curious, and you've done a few streams recently, about sort of not being nihilistic. What would you say, given that we're all in the sack of potatoes or Pringles in the can world, what is the task of, individual leftists trying to build something to take the next steps? And what are those next steps? What do they look like? And I realize that's a very weighty question. So yeah, just kind of curious what the brainstorms might be.
All right. Whew, that's a big question. Well, one thing I would say, take care of yourself first. You're not a useful comrade if you're a fucking wreck. So
for sure.
Make sure your mental health is in check. Be disciplined. Also have fun. Don't be a weird shut-in on streams all day. Go out and find yourself some kind of partner. Once you've done that, and I do think that's important. I do think, even as like organizing, I think it's important that you have a home base of security and that you provide one to other people as well. I think what we should be pulling for is we should be going into the unions in war mode. We're likely to take a bunch of hits in the courts on labor activism. We're already seeing the Mason-Dixon wall being thrown back up. We've seen this in these new anti-unionization bills coming out of the South, stopping the UAW seemingly dead in its tracks after a few months of success. We have models for success for this out of the industrial Midwest, but so far it really hasn't spread out. The other thing that you should do is not be in fucking New York or California. No,
you leave my state out of this.
But in all seriousness, when the great majority of unionized labor are in 3 states, New York, California, and Hawaii, even trying to expand the left pull through official labor unions is going to be a problem because you're already saturated there. And you live in a federal republic. So if you want to take over you want to even have an effect to be able to take over insurrectionarily, not that I'm telling you to do that for legal reasons, then you would also need to have real centers of influence in other parts of the country, particularly the Midwest, but also there needs to be real forays, not into salting the South by sending people down, but by picking up on organic dissatisfaction, of which there is plenty. I think party talk needs to be tampered down, because we've tried both the ultra-localist strategy in the 80s and 90s in response to the failures of the New Left and the failures of salting workforces in the 70s, which really tits up. And we basically have run through that entire cycle. We went through what took the New Left from 1963 to about 1981. We've done it in 8 years. Like, we've gone through that entire cycle in rapid succession. And that leads us in a really weird place where, culturally speaking, sympathies towards the left are both higher and lower than they've been in a long time. Higher in that a lot of people are not as hostile to left-wing ideas, even when they're sold as left-wing ideas. It used to be if you just took the gloss of the left off of them, they became popular. The moment you let them know they were left-wing, they instantly became unpopular. People don't trust leftists, and I think for good reason. So the one thing I would say to do, if you're asking for yourself personally, if you can join a union, join one. If you can start a union, start one. Although that's really fucking hard, and I'm not going to lie to you about that.
Sure. Yeah.
If you are involved politically, I would make sure you take relative independence from NGOs. And I think the other big thing is give up on this popular front, this idea that we can take over the Democrats. If an insider-outsider possibility, strategy was clearly possible, it was possible in 2016. When there was a lot of organic movement around Bernie. It has not been possible since then. And I know that's hard for people to accept, because we've been invested in this for almost a decade. But who did we train up to replace Bernie? Yeah. Who did we train up to, the squad? That's a fucking joke. Individual members of the squad may be fine, but as a political coherent force itself, is kind of spent. It definitely seems to be on the sheepdog end of things these days. So you should be active in labor politics if you can, but a lot of people can't. A lot of people live in states and are in industries that are not heavily unionized, and it's going to take you most of your life to build a union. Not that you shouldn't try. But you should be supporting labor campaigns. You should also be supporting things that often have weird knock-on effects. So one of the reasons why I support, in addition to being against ethnic cleansing and genocide, one of the reasons I support these Palestinian protests is something that's accidental to them. It's not even totally intended. Yes, these protests are smart, that are asking people to open up the books, but they're fairly elite protests with, 5 or 6% of campus on. And yes, the majority of people on campus theoretically support them, but they don't really have that much skin in the game. But what's important is what they expose about the books of these institutions. More and more of the institutions in U.S. life are captured for growth in stock markets and whatnot. Most of these universities, even the public ones, are basically rentier machines that go through and they basically get money from healthcare and from landlording. I mean, NYU and Columbia are the two biggest landlords in New York City. So we should be exposing as much of this as we can, and it's gonna make us enemies, because exposing where people's money comes from is what they're most afraid of. You can make demands all day. If they're not possible, they're in BLM, and it's going to take them a while to see Democratic politicians turn on you, even if they secretly send the cops out to crush your head in the middle of the night. But when you start asking for the books to be open, which is something they can do, but don't want to for a lot of obvious reasons, you're going to see those truncheons come out a lot faster, and no Democrat's going to come to save your ass. And that's actually what we need to be doing if you can't join the labor movement. The other thing that we should be doing is building bridges to other parts of the world and other left-wing movements in a more substantive sense. Like not telling them what to do, not sending people to go observe their elections or some stupid bullshit like that. And I'm not even talking about states. Like we should be talking about how to coordinate with other labor unions because, like, for example, if you want to deal with something in North America, you have both inter-US and inter-North American capital flight possibilities. You need to be able to hit in multiple areas at once in many states and in sometimes multiple countries. And so that's another place where you need to be really investing some energy. As for what organizations or whatever you should join, other than a union, I don't really have to tell you much. Go where your conscience tells you. I'm going to tell you right now, as I said earlier, the DSA doesn't have a lot of large donors. It's based its projections of its income in the past off of its projected membership, often kind of judging its membership numbers. It takes almost a year to fall off the membership numbers of the DSA. So whenever you get a membership snapshot, you're like 1 or 2 years out. So right now they're claiming larger numbers, and they haven't been releasing how small their numbers are lately. But I do know a lot of locals can't make core. If you want to invest in that, you have to invest in that with a war mentality too, because you're going to have to pick a caucus to reform it, because at current, it's not a viable institution and it's too wedded to the Democratic Party. And now that it's served its use in the Democratic Party, which is creating a sense of urgency in Democratic politics, which still tied people back into the center of the Democratic Party ultimately, they're going to throw it under the bus. You see this explicitly with AOC. Read AOC's recent discussion with Ryan Grimm. It's not even betrayal. I mean, it should have been fucking predictable, but it's something we should know as we go into the future. So you should be very careful with, listening or getting in with Democrats. That's one of the other things I would tell you.
Well, thank you very much for the call, and have a good night, Tim.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Peace out.
Yeah. Do you have any, I don't want to take up too much time, do you have any elaboration or reading on war footing, your sort of frame there, organizational strategies, that sort of thing?
Reen J. McAlevey and Ken Moody, although know that McAlevey generally makes too many union staffers and not enough union rank and file members, and Ken Moody focuses too much on logistics. But go in and read the debates around the union about union membership. But also maybe, even though I wouldn't necessarily tell you to become a member, I'd also read up on the trainings around the IWW. So if you want to know how to actually do organizations, that's probably what I would start. And if you have a chance to go to Labor Notes, go.
Well, again,
thanks, man.
Thank you for the call, Tim. Have a good one. Derick Varn, making the world a better place. If you want to hear Derick Varn talk about the history of the IWW, well, we have an episode that Varn and Toussaint did with Ben Fong of Damage Magazine. Check that out in the TIR live stream archives. Also, we cut clips. If that's just too much for you, if the hour and a half is too much, there's clips of that. So we do it all here on TIR. We got a couple more calls, Varn, and then you can get back to preparing to read people's names all wrong. Please make sure you record yourself reading those names all wrong. Calling from a 201 area code caller, what is your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, how you doing? My name is Pete. Yep. I'm calling from Indiana, although I'm not from Indiana. And I've been listening to y'all for a minute, Jason, Pascal, and Varn. You just had a real good series on, oh my God, I forget what it was, the program, the golf program, right? Is that what it was?
The Varn did, yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's right. So I'm really excited just to get through and talk to you all. I want to say too that this is a great session, and I hope y'all do it more. You know what I'm saying? Have it open to people like me who are not Patreon members. I'm a little broke right now. I can't really be a Patreon member. But anyway, Varn, what I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you could cover this. I don't know if you're interested in covering this, but you just mentioned right now that you sign off on the campus demonstrations, right? That you're not too suspect of them, which is cool. But some of the folks that y'all roll with in Sublation, like Patron, seem to have a different interpretation. And I don't know if you're aware of it. And so if you're not, then maybe you can't comment on it. But it's kind of tied in with my sense that Patron's interpretation, his selling of like Marxism, in part, which I'm down with, is this whole thing on liberalism. And kind of liberalism and kind of, him and Spencer, bringing back liberalism, so to speak, and selling that as, the strong suit of Marxism. I mean, that's cool. You know what I'm saying? But the problem I got is when he folks like Patron tie up this attempt to sell liberalism with this romanticization of, kind of the colonial past, if you will. And I'm also, again, I'm saying colonialism within quotations here. I mean, it is a thing, in spite of the fact that it's become a paradigm that's a little, over the top. It's a thing that happened. It's a thing that still happens. And so, just to wrap the question up here, essentially he said that what made British colonialism so great in the North American context was that it was such an endearing project that even the Native Americans were sold on it. This is more or less, I mean, this is maybe might be a caricature, right? But my sense is that like liberalism and the presence of these settler colonials over in North America sold this bill of goods of capitalism more than the expansionism, the violence of the expansionism, or what have you. So there's kind of a question there. I hope you caught it. But if you didn't, again, it has to do with whether or not you, first of all, one question, whether or not you buy this idea of like Marxist liberalism and the way to control and Spencer's Leonard, I think it is, sell it. And then whether or not you can accept this idea that, at least that control advances, that what was more important for settler colonialism functioning in context of North America was the fact that it was such an enduring project rather than its violence. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much for the call, and appreciate you following these shows. It means a lot. Go for it.
Well, we're 250 years into to the national project of the United States. We're 400 years into British settled colonial project. I don't know, man. The caliphates lasted longer. The Ottoman Empire lasted longer. The Byzantine Empire lasted a fuck lot longer. So, longevity on the world scale, still pretty new. Its acceleration of productivity, however, is entirely different. And that's one of the things that makes capitalism and liberalism somewhat unique. There are a bunch of innovations in Platypus affiliated society thinking, and it's not a unified group, and I don't want to pretend that it is. I used to be in it. I left over a decade ago on slightly acrimonious terms, which have been somewhat healed. Although I will say that sometimes I felt like when I left, Doug Lane went to Platypus affiliated society kind of to personally piss me off. Nonetheless, I do think I learned a lot from Chris, but there are some disagreements. One, I think he has a relatively undialectical view of the development of empire. It's like for all that he talks about the Frankfurt School and Adorno, he seems to be listening to Horkheimer and kind of ignoring the dialectics of Enlightenment a little bit. Two, he thinks that liberalism has regressed, just like it did during the Bonapartist phase, and that maybe Bonapartism in the form of right-wing Bonapartism around something like right populists like Trump could force a crisis that could cause the left to reevaluate itself or unify or something. I'm not quite sure. This is not to say that they've ever endorsed voting for Trump or anything like that, and I think they're right that we should not be blackmailed into supporting center-right Democrats just because a threat from outside. As far as, the larger part of the project, I mean, I don't know. I tend to think if you don't deal with the fact that the settler colonial projects were highly exterminationist and that they largely functioned to primitively accumulate a shit ton of raw materials in the capital, whether or not they were feudal or semi-feudal or something else in their initial instantiation, is to kind of miss the long durée of the development. And I also do think there is something of an idealization of the early pre-capitalist, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, bourgeois culture in Platypus affiliated society that is almost an overcorrective to the lack of dialectics on the more conventional left, which does not see that Marxism is dependent on liberalism to develop out of it. Where I would push back on Patron, and have now for over a decade, is I do think Marxism does become its own thing. It is not merely liberalism. And I don't think Platypus affiliated society is the only group of people that say that Marxism is liberalism. There's all these Marxist Rawlians who I don't hate. I mean, I'm good friends with one of them personally, Ben Burgess, and I like Matt McManus a lot, but they have the same project and come to opposite conclusions about everything else as far as like what that means. So if anything, that tells us that what that means is not entirely clear. Some of the stuff in regards to Palestine is that it's hard to figure out how Marxists should orient around the national question, since national liberation is something Marxists have historically supported, at least with some caveats. There's times when Lenin, for example, says we shouldn't support national liberation because it would help one empire over another, and we shouldn't be helping any. And he says it explicitly, for example, about Serbian national liberation in the context of World War I, that he would support it generally, but not in the specific context of strengthening the German Empire or the Russian Empire or the British Empire. I think we should take that a little bit more seriously all the way around and kind of be more consistent in our anti-imperialism. And I mean that in a deeper sense. I'm also somewhat sympathetic to Catron's claims that anti-imperialism is not enough, nor does it make a coherent politics. And I would say, like, right now we can all, well, not all of us, but most of us agree that a ceasefire is needed in Gaza, unless you're a Zionist, I guess. Almost no one agrees on what we do after it, even on the left. And what would be realistic to do, what is viable to do, what do we mean by from the river to the sea? Those kinds of things. We know what's historically meant by that, which is a one unified state. But it's hard to imagine how that happens. And I also do have to admit that sometimes I get a little lost in how much we're, when we talk about like the movements of death right now, Palestine's a pretty bad one because you got like, you got death ratios of percentages of the population that you haven't seen since World War II. I think we're probably approaching 2% of the Palestinian population, many of which women and children, most of which women and children, honestly. But if you put it into the scale of the international order, Palestine doesn't have the population of Alabama. So that's something to think about when we think about like where we're going as these other wars heat up. So there's all that. I'm not sure that answers your question. I suppose that I am just a little bit more skeptical than Catron that we can clearly say that there's only one revolution, and it's the bourgeois revolution, and the bourgeois revolution ends in communism. Classical communists, by and large, did not think that. It is clear when you read the Second International and Daniel De Leon criticizing the Second International, etc., that they had a two-stage model of revolution, first a bourgeois, then a socialist. It's clear in Plekhanov. It's clear in Lenin. You can't even understand the left opposition versus Stalin and Bukharin debates if you don't have that framework. It literally makes no sense. So I'm a little bit skeptical as to that claim that is often made. But I will say that they do some good work on parsing out that what was meant by Bonapartism and imperialism and what was being critiqued as that pre-Lenin is different than what's being critiqued as that post-Lenin. And Spencer Leonard's two books on the matter, and which are mostly about Marxist journalism, which is an underread part of Marx. But I do think his books on the matter are clarifying, even if you don't come to his conclusion. As people ask me what claim am I skeptical that Chris makes, I'm skeptical of the claim that the socialist revolution is just the completion of the bourgeois revolution, and that if we defend liberalism, it will end up in communism. I would also tell people that Chris is a very slippery thinker. Like, he changes his opinions and he nuances them. For example, the distinction between capitalist and bourgeois culture was not taught in Platypus when I was in it, but it is commonly discussed by them now. I'm not sure that he ever says where he's changed his mind explicitly, but I know he does. If you ask him directly, he'll probably tell you. I'll also say, as a comrade to argue against, Catrone actually does think that one of the things that would be important for a vibrant left-wing culture is high internal debates and being able to debate things that are hard to debate, including, for example, our stances on national liberation, whether or not decolonization actually really decolonizes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that they think a lot about. So yeah. But I would also say, like, just because I was part of Catrone's organization a decade ago, and also that I used to work for Doug Lane, you could never say that Doug and I had the same political vision, and you could never say that me and Catrone, even when I was in Platypus. So I would be careful about reading me in the same way of reading them.
That's fair. It is funny to me that people think because we have people on our show that we agree with them like lockstep.
I'm not even sure we agree with each other lockstep.
Not at all. I don't agree with your beard at all. I think your C. Everett Koop beard is problematic.
Someone asked me what I did in Platypus. I was a member and organizer in South Korea, which, by the way, Platypus is an educational association. That's really all they do is set up discussion panels and publish articles. They don't view themselves as a political movement other than about pedagogy. Make of that what you will. So it's what I did, what all Platypus members who aren't the leadership do. So,
all right, we're almost through with these calls. Calling from a 214 area code caller. What is your name and where are you calling from? Caller 214. Calling from a 214. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Press the talk button.
You probably can do that.
Calling from a 214 area
can you hear
code.
me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Hey, this is Austin from Denton, Texas.
Hell yeah.
Quick biograph note. I'm kind of like a dumb version of Matt McManus.
Okay.
Like Matt, because I read a ton of things of people that I violently disagree with. Like, Heidegger and Nietzsche and Strauss, those sorts of things. and dumb because I read far less and I probably drink way more than he does. But yeah, big fan of you guys and Matt. And I want to say I wish I was I don't think I'm a patron for Derick, even though I should be, but he'll forgive me because I've bought so many Christopher Lasch books in the past few months. I'm still playing catch up.
So when my book comes out in like 2035 on Christopher Lasch, you'll buy it.
Oh, for sure. Hopefully I'll still be around. We'll see.
Hopefully I'll still be around.
Yeah,
too.
my question, I hope it didn't come across as... What was that?
Go ahead.
I hope my question didn't come across as like sort of philosophically nativist or national chauvinist or anything like that. But I've always been curious about American exceptionalism and the sort of Americanization sense of America being kind of unique in relation to its European counterparts. And one of the things that kind of stimulated this idea is from the right through Strauss. He said something to the effect of, it would not be after like World War II, after Germany is defeated, he said something along the lines of, it would not be the first time that a nation like destroyed on the battlefield has deprived its like the victors, its conquerors, the sublime fruit of their victory by imposing on them the yoke of its own thought, like Germany imposing its thought on America, which he probably wrote with an impish grin strewn across his visage because he was a German. But I was wondering. I mean, this is going to come across as kind of Freudian, maybe, because it's sort of historicist take on Dewey and Whitman as being better alternatives to Marx. But that's like not where I'm going with this. But it is kind of in a similar vein. Do you see because I mean Strauss, for instance, kind of displaced the sort of Deweyite school and the more historicist Burkean conservatives, back in the day, at least that's for my reading. And do you think there's something still there in the American pragmatists as a counter, including Christopher Lasch? I mean, I know you said that Christopher Lasch hates Dewey, but do you see in the American,
really hates Dewey
school? No, I know, and I'm just going to finish, but I want you to tell me why. As a counter to sort of the American left academia as being either Eurocentric or more recently like third worldist, collectivism being like a good thing in and of itself and being kind of discursive. In my opinion, do you see the Americanist school and Lasch playing into this as being a counter to that sort of incoherency?
Yeah, that's a good question. So American pragmatism is to me, well, I mean, I'm going to say something very, very controversial. If you've studied pragmatism, the only pragmatist I've ever thought was worth a shit was Charles Sanders Peirce. And that's because he was really probably a Hegelian. But I do think, however, that the devaluing of American thought in America is a weird form of American exceptionalism, that like we don't study our own left-wing tradition. We don't tend to know people like Randolph Bourne or Daniel De Leon or people know about Debs kind of, they know about I mean, even getting people to look at like key members of the Communist Party, regardless of whether or not you agree with them, like William Z. Foster or Big Bill Haywood, not Big Bill Haywood, I forgot his name, his major black thinker. Anyway, I do think there is that we need to look at various. We should not be totally dependent on European theorists. If you're going to pull from theorists outside of the United States, I'd pull from people from Latin America and from China as much as I would anybody from Europe. And that includes knowing the pragmatist school. So like one of the critiques that Lash made of Dewey, and Lash, as you pointed out, it thinks that the American left doesn't actually know its own history. I mean, he's one of the people that I pull from here. But his critique of Dewey is that Deweyan pragmatism sets itself up as preparing people to be self-sufficient away from capital, but what it actually ends up doing is doing the training for the factories for them and downgrading other sorts of education that would give workers the power to enrich and educate themselves beyond workplace education. So he's very critical of Deweyan pragmatism as seeming to empower the common people, but actually just mainly making them factory cogs. There's a lot more to this. He also has a problem with Dewey because Dewey's wrong on both world wars, that he supports the U.S. entering World War I and doesn't support World War II, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, but to understand that, you have to know this history. And you know, I'm a little bit less sanguine than I've met some people like Rawls and the Kantian utilitarian pragmatist hybrid thinkers that make up a lot of left liberalism in the 1970s. But I do think if you're going to argue with liberals, you need to know what Rawls thought to do it, because a lot of, you know, we can throw Foucault and whoever else at them all day, and they know them very well. I mean, one of the things that you get from reading American liberals reading of Foucault is they read Foucault and read the part about the panopticon and then decided that maybe it was a good idea to build it ourselves. But these are things that we really need to be familiar with. When it comes to the United States and our own tradition of leftism here, I do think we should know our history a lot better than we do. For a lot of people, the American left begins with the baby boomer left, the quote new left, and the silent generation left, the quote new left. And there's some heroic things in the deep past, but it's like basically Eugene Debs happened and nothing, then FDR happened and nothing, then the new left happened and everything got fucked up. You really need to know the longue durée class positions of a lot of this stuff. Why was the Populist Party what it was in the 19th century? Why did it liquidate into the Democrats when the Democrats were still like barely a generation and a half out from being on the bad side of the Civil War? Like, what happened? Why were there strong left associations in America in the evangelical movement that turned on the left very quickly in the 1920s and 30s? Like, how do we should know these things, and we should know them well. We should know the history beyond just New York, beyond just Chicago and Haymarket. Now, before I get accused of a thing that I think it's fair to accuse me of a lot of the time, which is just telling everybody to read more. I don't think everybody needs to know all this stuff. Study the stuff you want to study. So if you're interested in the American left and the pragmatist school, read about the left intersections and departures from the pragmatist school. I can tell you who you can read the work of Louis Menand, the Americanist, not a Marxist, but a good historian. You can start with the Metaphysical Club and go from there if you want like some relatively easy reading on those histories. But you need to know these things because we have joined up and split with those groups multiple times in our history as socialists. Also, Marxian socialism is not the only form of socialism in the United States historically, and we should probably be familiar with the other ones, even though they are kind of historical footnotes today. Because they come back up every now and then. Georgism is a weird one that keeps on coming back up. Mutualism is another one that comes back up every now and then. If I was going to trace the long durée of something like someone mentioned the Zeitgeist movement and the Venus Project and all that other stuff earlier on, and you know, a lot of that stuff is French, but a lot of it's also American. Some of that stuff goes back to Fourierism in the 19th century. I mean, it really helps to know this stuff. And if you're interested in it, learn it. I mean, you could use that and teach it so other people don't have to learn it. I mean, I read a lot of books, so you don't have to read them all. You know, that's what I would say about that. And that's why I do stuff like this. I hope that helps. It doesn't totally answer your question because I don't just want to do my normal thing, like where I shit on pragmatism and talk about how much I hate it. But because I do think that the impulse in the question about the American leftists knowing what Americans think, and not just like the white ones either. You know, we should know what the various indigenous tribes organized themselves and what the black movements thought at different times. And we should read how they got captured. I mean, because a lot of them did. Like how they got tied into various different anti-communist movements when they got frustrated. You know, you should really study what the Congress of Cultural Freedom did and stuff like that. It didn't just get Trotskyists. So these are things that we should really, really kind of, you know, try to develop an understanding of. And I will say, you know, to anyone, if you're going to talk about organizing in America, you need to know what, like, you need to have a deeper understanding of this than most of the liberals you're arguing with, who, you know, be like, oh, well, now we're in intersectional feminism. Well, you need to understand where that comes from. Its relationship to Marxism, and there is one. And what would be the critiques historically, or any of this stuff, because it's going to come up. Someone like Matt Manis tries to kind of, I think he's trying to square the circle a little bit too hard, you know, by kind of claiming that we're all part of one, you know, liberal tradition, and like Marxist are the liberaliest of them all. I'm not sure I know what liberal means anymore, since everyone uses it to talk about everything. And it's kind of applicable because we all are in liberal states and we come from liberal political traditions, but they're so fragmented now that I could call everybody a fucking liberal. And it's kind of true. Like, so you'll notice that I don't do that very often, even though, you know, it's a temptation because everyone but me is a liberal, right? Anyway,
Sorry, I was talking with the mute on. I typed it into our private chat. I think that's why you're smiling. All right, this is our final call of the night. Calling from a 661 area code. Caller, what is your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Mike. I'm calling from the Trump-loving part of NorCal. Don't hold that against me too much.
Of NorCal?
But,
where is that?
Are you like past in this like
just south of Reading?
Okay, yeah, that's facts. That's facts. Okay,
that is that's the red part of North
Yeah.
Cal.
Are you near Chico?
Just shy of an hour northeast of Chico.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. What would you like to talk to Derick Varn about?
Yeah, first time, long time, as the saying goes. And much like you, I was a right winger, and then I became a lefty. So your thoughts on that, Derick, echo mine. And my question is on Dugan. I've been appreciating your series you've been doing on your channel with your guests on the sports political theory. My question is, why, in spite of the amount of effort that Ukrainians have used to try and kill the guy, you still disregard the level of influence he does have, at least on the online right? And I find it somewhat bleeds into, you know, my real life here in NorCal.
So you asked me why. I actually think he's hugely influential in the right and even parts of the left outside of Russia. I'm not sure how influential he is inside of Russia. And I really say that because I'm not sure. Russians tell me wildly different things. I feel very opaque. As for his effect on right-wing conversations, some of that is that his rhetoric is actually morphing to match American right-wing debate when he talks to us. So I'll give you an example of that. Like, there's a lot of stuff he says that just sounds like more sophisticated versions of what the bullshit you hear in an Alex Jones speech. So there is a way in which he's having real influence on the right. I also think I think if we look at, like, say, the Libertarian Party caucus, my former friend and ex-Marxist Michael Rettenwald, representative of the von Mises caucus, lost, as did Trump himself. For the Libertarian side, and some milquetoast normie libertarian. I think we are watching the right splinter again, as it becomes clear that Trump didn't create anything other than himself. So there's going to be a battle in what post-Trumpism looks like, and the things that we thought it could be, something like Ron DeSantis thought, or this, that, or the other, it's not clear. There's even been tamping down on that, and like the Marjorie Taylor Greene world, when Trump kind of allowing her to be punished and thrown under the bus to some degree. To go back to the influence of Dugan, though, Dugan's been influential on the right in America for a while. How influential? I get a lot of pushback from right wingers who tell me that I'm chasing some weirdo. And I think that has not been helped by the Putin's brain stuff. Matt McManus on Ben Burgess' show said that that's been promulgated by Dugan himself. I don't think so. I think it's been promulgated by U.S. liberals. I actually have not heard Dugan. I mean, one of Dugan's weirder books is Putin versus Putin, where he's critical of Putin. So, he's not necessarily in lockstep with the regime, but I think you're right that we should kind of take him. The people who yell at me that I'm taking him too seriously also tend to move in former traditionalist milieus, which means that they are tied to related milieus anyway. One thing I would say, though, is a lot of these weirder thinkers of the right sometimes leave us to miss more common thinkers on the right, like Russell Kirk or Samuel Huntington or people like that. And if you really start reading Dugan, you can actually see where he's picking up with some of these ideas, but using them in a different way. So Samuel Huntington is all over fourth political theory indirectly. His notion of the class of civilizations and civilizational politics is something that Dugan's directly buying into. Dugan just picks a different civilization to support. There you go. But I do think people should know what he says. I mean, but one of the reasons why I'm going through this long thing is for some people, even some people leftists, even some people I do a show with, they find Dugan captivating, and I don't really understand why. So I would love to get, what's going on there. The other thing I would say right now on the right wing is, there is a lot of scrambling right now. I mean, I mentioned that before, but like the fact that Tucker Carlson is giving Alex Jones the time of day, and that political figures beyond like the Ron Paul movement and people who are relatively marginalized in conservative circles are giving more marginal figures the time of day. And that the more intellectual end of the movement, say the National Conservative Movement, for example, which is a much more serious threat than like the alt-right, well, it's even fragmenting right now into various factions, indicates that there's something going on that the left just doesn't really understand. And the explainers of the right to the left, people who I often respect, like Matt McManus or Sam Adler-Bell and Matthew Sitman, they must not be seeing something either. Like there's something that's being missed in the analysis. So we need to watch this stuff more closely, particularly since it looks like that the right's going to do well in the next election. So, but what that right means is hard to say. It seems purely anti-systemic, which means that we don't really know what it's for. We only know that it hates libs. So, it's hard to know.
I hope that answers your question.
May I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
It says, I was curious, do you think that perhaps Steve Bannon reflects in his ideology somewhat of the same sort of, I suppose, ideology of Dugan, but more tailor-made for an American audience?
I do. I do think Bannon is actually trying to synthesize the European right and the paleo-conservative right into an American version of the European right. But you know, Bannon's an interesting figure because he's both a boogeyman to liberals, and he's popular with Trumpists when Trumpists are not in power, but the moment they're in power, he's sidelined. So it's hard to know how much influence that's really going to have. The other thing is, though, it has affected the general broader conservative movement because Project 2025 is not a Trump project. It's a Heritage Foundation project, which is a fundamental shift from the old conservative think tanks of just a decade ago. So they are having some effect.
Thank you.
Thank you for your call. And that is it for the calls. I'm going to hang up the phone as we ran all the phone money out. That's a good show. I hope you're proud of yourself, Derick Varn.
I didn't suggest opening the phones up, so.
Wow. You calling me names? Do I look like Greg Tate to you?
For one, you're still alive.
You know, I feel like that should be something Pascal and I should be proud of.
That you killed Greg Tate?
No, because I actually liked some of his music journalism. That we made that man so mad that he went and wrote that fucking 5,000 word bullshit in like The Nation or something about in defense of Afro pessimism. That's kind of badass.
You know what? You know, Afro pessimism. Oh, I should be very careful about what I'm about to say. But Afro pessimism very much reminds me of the whole anti-Semitism as a unique prejudice school of Zionism.
Okay.
Where it's like, our elites can do whatever we need them to do because like we've always been an oppressed people. We're uniquely hated in history. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I find it interesting that, you know, when I was talking about Jewish stuff and he went on Afro pessimist and I was like, you know who's kind of a Judeo pessimist? Mir Kahana.
I thought you were going to say Norm Finkelstein.
Different kind of Judeo pessimist.
Different kind of pessimist. We do have a super chat. Will the revolution bring in cat girls and cat boys? If not, I'm not interested. Have some cheddar. Thank you so much, Dizzle.
Sure. I don't know.
I think it's going to bring in. What do you think it's going to bring in? Is there going to be a revolution? Will it be televised? It'll be streamed.
This revolution will be. You know,
I'm still waiting for the Pepsi revolution.
Yeah, on revolutions, I have often thought about one thing is when you talk to me about a revolution and you like don't even have a militia, I don't know what you're
when you don't
about.
Want people in your organization that served. You know, Mac, who does the sports show with me, was not allowed in the DSA chapter where he lives in Fayetteville because he wasn't.
Because he's a ex-veteran?
Yep.
That's fucking stupid. I get not allowing cops, but veterans are a different deal.
Yep.
Like, anyway, this is not Varn shits on the DSA even more than I normally do. I mean, I have DSA guests coming on soon, so I guess I should play nice. But like, is there an organization that is a more incoherent bunch of left habitats? You know, just like habits that we've had that have probably not served us, and even contradictory ones. And you know, it's hard for me to say. I mean, like the same organization will be calling for like how we should support defunding the police to also why we need a bunch more cops, and it's in the same organization. And I'm not saying that's bad. That could be a sign of like a good left-wing debate culture, but that doesn't seem to be what it is. It just seems to be like an incoherent bunch of opportunisms.
Can you answer this question for Lady Braga 77? And I hope the 77 is for the year that you were born, which is the greatest year of all time. What is
because it was the year you were.
Yes, it was the year I was born. It is the greatest year. Well, Star Wars and Elvis come out, or Star Wars comes out, Elvis goes away. What a great year!
Is a male fictional character with cat ears, a tail, and female characteristics are a cat-based furry? Or someone who uses cat avatars on Twitter?
Yeah. Jason's room has serious Prince vibes.
It's that bisexual lighting you got right now.
You know what's so funny?
You are guilty of bisexual lighting, Jason.
It's because one light is broke. There's one row of the colors that's off. So this is what I'm stuck with, and this is what we have. We cannot afford new lights. It is not a necessity. The plane ticket to DC was the necessity. Oh, you know who's gonna be in DC? Varn?
We are.
Oh yeah, we are. Marcus is coming.
Oh, sweet.
Mac is driving up from North Carolina.
There's a bunch of people coming down to see me from New York, which is interesting.
Oh, okay, it's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, we're gonna have
You saw the thing about the after party afterwards, right? We sent you that.
No,
the VIP thing we're doing afterwards.
I mean, I've been told we're probably doing a VIP thing, and I'm gonna have to be there. So, and I will promise to stay calm and sober enough that I won't challenge your audience to an actual fist fight. And I won't threaten to stab anyone. I promise, unless they deserve it.
Apparently, Jason out here queer baiting us with his lighting. Toussaint calls me, what does she call me? The most heterosexual man she knows. I'm boringly heterosexual.
Yeah, you are. Absolutely. Toussaint is right.
Boringly, yeah. So boring. Yeah.
Oh, man. I mean, look, in our world, it's like normiedom is weird enough that it's actually kind of refreshing, but still.
Oh, yeah. So something more than missionary. Whoa. Look here, you freak.
This is not the after show, Jason. There's no champagne room after the Mau Mau.
There is no champagne room after the Mau Mau. Yeah. No, there's Jason talks about all his dates. I don't talk about all of them. I talk about all the ones that I fuck up on because I want everybody to feel very comfortable striking out. And I will strike out for all of you guys. I'm really good at it right now. I'm like in a strikeout zone.
Jason doesn't take one for the team. It is the lack of taking that he's doing for the team.
I strike out so you don't have to. I asked this woman out, and she said, and I asked her out on multiple occasions, and she looked at me and she said, "Are you tired of asking me out yet and getting turned down?" It's like, oof. Yikes.
Do you think this is a 90s teen comedy, Jason?
She didn't like that I held a radio in front of her job.
You would look cooler doing that than Matthew Broderick, but nonetheless.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Strike out so you don't have to. Someone says, am I the only one that finds this level of parasociality a little commercial? Yeah, probably. Fucking suck. I don't know what to tell you. Live a little. It's okay. I love when people are the edgiest one in the room.
This is Jason, this is the Mau Mau hour. How can we lack an edge when you have a machete over my head? Like, just saying. Like, you might as well call it the burning tire after hour or something. This is just, you know.
I was gonna. I thought about making a fucking different title, and I was like, nah, because Finkelstein filled in for Pascal for a Mau Mau once.
Yeah, and it was sorry, all white people look alike. It was John Cusack, not Matthew Broderick, but they're both annoying.
Look, John Cusack is in my favorite romance movie.
What is that?
Better Off Dead.
That's not a bad movie.
That's a fucking rad ass movie. And I got to interview Diane Franklin, who plays the love interest in that movie, on this show. That was a fucking treat and a half. So,
you know what I'm doing right now? I'm watching all the Godzilla movies in order. So,
dude, I feel like I just discovered, like, I knew Tubi existed, but so much changes when you watch stuff. You know, you watch stuff in Mexico, you have to get a VPN because you can't watch it. But Tubi gives no fucks. They're like, yeah, whatever you watch in the States, you can watch here. We give no fucks. And, you know, they just play movies. Holy shit, dude. I got to find this movie. I think it's called Party Line with Leif Garrett and the dark-haired dude from Battlestar Galactica. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, which one? There's a lot of dark.
So the original Battlestar Galactica from what, 78?
Okay, so old school. So we're like pre James Edward.
Are
you talking about James Edward Armos? Like,
no, I'm talking about the 70s Battlestar Galactica, where the ships look like Star Wars because it was the same ship designer. That dark-haired dude plays like one of those Mel Gibson kind of. He's a loose cannon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, you know, you remember those movies in the 80s and 90s that were pretty much slashers, but they had to be erotic thrillers?
Yeah, like Hand That Rocks the Cradle, Fatal Attraction, everything that Michael Douglas was in for 10 years.
Yeah, or all that stuff that would come on cable late at night. This was totally one of those. And you know who Leif Garrett is?
Yeah, I know who Leif Garrett is.
Dancing. So Leif Garrett plays this dude, and all these movies were coming up where like there was a lot of incest or implied incest. So Leif Garrett is this really rich dude. He's got this really rich sister, and they just kill people for fun. They set him up with this party line. They call a party line, and when people get on the party, like, hey, I'm the guy with the big dick. And then his sister like entices them with something sexy on the party line. They meet up in real life, and then Leif Garrett comes up, and like for no reason they try to like blackmail him, and you think they're going to ask for money, and they don't ask for money, and they just kill him. And you go, why do you even blackmail him? Just kill him. The blackmail is totally unnecessary if you don't want their money. If you guys are already like rich millionaires living in the Hollywood Hills, it doesn't make any sense. So they're going on this rampage, and they're just killing people willy-nilly. And then you find out Leif Garrett likes to wear his mom's wedding, like their parents are dead, and he likes to wear his mom's wedding dress, and the sister gets mad at him for doing it, and then he gets mad and kills her, and then the cops are, you know, they finally figured out who's doing all this weird killing. The plot doesn't make any sense. It's going to be killing and boobs, and it's kind of all you care about.
I was about to say, like, this almost sounds reactionary, but it doesn't sound coherent enough to be reactionary.
Not coherent at all, right? So there's a scene where Leif Garrett has the female protagonist like captured, and he's doing the thing where he's like telling her this whole life story, and she knees him in the nuts and then throws him over a 3-story balcony, and he hits the ground as one does when they fall off a 3-story balcony, and like blood comes out, and he's dead because it's 3 stories, and he literally fell on his face. And I was like, oh, okay, that's an ending. But then Leif Garrett just gets up and just starts running around and chasing people.
Mm-hmm.
And then they eventually shoot him, and all this other stupid crap happens. But I have to find this movie for you and send it to you, because after that went off, then an equally reactionary movie with the same cast of people came on, but a different rogue cop that flies by the seat of his pants. And that was played by Robert Forrester, who you will remember from Jackie Brown. And
yeah, I love me some Robert Forrester, which I know from more than Jackie Brown, but yeah.
But he has one of the better lines in the movie where someone says that they're protected by the Second Amendment, and he because a bunch of people got killed, and he's like, well, what amendment protected the people from dying? And we're like, well, nothing, because they're dead, you dummy. So they're all reactionary, they're all ridiculous, none of them are coherent. It's just violence for violence sake, nudity for no reason whatsoever.
So a 90s movie.
Yes. Yes.
So a cheap ass 90s movie that was made to go on Skinamax,
but good enough. Good enough to get actors. Like, we were watching it, we're like, dude, this is a kind of a good fucking cast. They have some like real deal actors in this. But this must have been when Leif Garrett was knee deep in his addiction.
Yeah, I was watching, you know, the weirdest movie I've seen in a while. I was watching Freeway 2 Confessions of a Trick Baby.
The Hansel and Gretel one.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, the Natasha Lyonne,
yes.
But like the witch is a transsexual cult leading cannibal child pornographer. Like,
as they are.
You know, in Mexico City, I guess. I mean, like, I was actually going through it. I was like, man, this is, you know, even for a Vincent Gallo movie, this is a lot more problematic than I was expecting.
Freeway 1 I thought was actually really good.
Freeway 1 is a great movie. Freeway 2 is insane.
Horrible. Like, I didn't dig it. It felt like, because it's different people. Or was it the same director? I forget.
It is directed by Matthew Bright, but no one else came over. So like, you get Natasha Lyonne as a replacement for what's her face? Reese Witherspoon. Which, to be fair, Natasha Lyonne is probably cooler than Reese Witherspoon, but Oliver Stone's not involved. He didn't produce this one. So it seems to be that Freeway, you know, gave Matthew Bright enough money that he could really screw himself in a writing direction. Because after Freeway 2, he only made 3 more movies, like, and they all came out in the same year. So.
Dude, Freeway was like, oh, this is a really interesting take on Real Red Riding Hood, and then you watch Freeway 2, and you're like, this sucks.
Oh, it's terrible. I mean,
but I've watched it like 47 times.
But it's terrible in a very watchable way,
a comfortable Sunday afternoon kind of way.
If you like your Sunday afternoon involving incestual transsexual cannibals, then sure. But
dude, again, we're trying to shake up the Tubi algorithm now so we can stop getting all these incestuous sibling films.
I was about to say, like, I mean, you know what? The incest porn twin of the aughts makes a lot more sense when I think about like the erotic thriller trends of the 90s, but still, like gross.
Yeah, it's all really gross, but it is also when you're like, it's 2 a.m. We stayed up till like 2 a.m. watching this shit, kind of nodding off, and then you'd wake up and a new one would be on, and there'd be some crazy shit on the screen. Like, what the fuck is going on now? We have to find out how it ends.
Jason, every time I've ever been around you, there's been some crazy shit on the screen. When I woke up drunk watching that Ken Russell movie,
The White
Worm, and we woke up during the snake orgy.
We totally did.
I woke up and I was like, is that woman having sex with a snake on this prestige movie channel?
That she is. Criterion.
It was just, you know, and you knew it. You knew we were going in for that, and you did not warn us. I mean, I should have known. It was a Ken Russell movie. What Ken Russell movie's not fucked up? But like, still,
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, there's a lot of dicks getting bit off in that movie. You're gonna get your dick bit off.
You know, Ken Russell's a weird guy for a fairly Orthodox Catholic. That's all I gotta say. Like I even watched his Lord Byron movie. like his Lord Byron Mary, like is it Gothic, Gothica?
Mhm.
That shit's wild too.
Did you like Gothica? You talking about the Halle Berry and was it Robert Downey in that?
No, it's before that. That's wait, not
Oh, you're
Gothica.
talking about Ken Russell's.
Ken Russell's.
Okay, sorry.
It's about like Mary Shelley. What is it? It might just be called Gothic.
Dude, do you see this?
What
is Tubi just Pornhub for people who don't know how to find porn?
The 90s. The 90s was Pornhub for people who couldn't have access to. I mean, like,
yeah,
tits were a bigger deal pre-internet, so they were in a lot more movies.
Yeah, like the internet has ruined, I think, the way people look at like even romance.
Well, no, it's actually it is kind of fucked up because I was talking to someone about well, kids are like, well, if there's nudity in it, it's just porn. And I'm like, beside the kind of occasionally, not so occasionally fucked up dynamics of like nude scenes and stuff, like there is a good call to have realistic stuff in movies that is not porn, so that you have adult relationships portrayed on film at all. And you know, as opposed to whatever the fuck you guys like think. I don't know, like the amount of people who complained to me about how fucked up Poor Things was, and when I asked them why, they were like, well, there's so much sex, and I was like, that's your problem with that movie?
Don't watch 9.5 Weeks.
Don't watch anything made between 1985 and 1997. Like,
don't watch Angel Heart. Don't watch Revenge of the Nerds.
Okay, but you probably shouldn't watch Revenge of the Nerds anyway.
It does not hold up. It's like listening to Winger now. It's like I was playing this 80s glam metal playlist I made, and I love
put Winger on a playlist,
on a glam metal playlist. Yes, I did.
I mean, it is, and it does fit, but my God, man,
that is
we were making fun of Winger in the 90s. Like,
look, you could have. But you can't deny the groove of 17. That's a hell of a riff. And that band
you're right. You're right.
But when you're driving, I shouldn't say luckily, consent laws where I live are kind of archaic, but driving down the street with the windows down and I'm just kind of nodding along and I'm thinking, and then all of a sudden that hook comes in and you're like, ooh, let me turn this song off. Just doesn't hit the same way when you're 46.
No,
it came out when I was like maybe 11, maybe 12.
Yeah, so you were aiming upwards then.
Yeah, yeah. 17 was like, man, she's a senior in high school. Now it's like, oh, a senior in high school. It's disgusting.
For real though, it really is.
The one thing I remember about Angel Heart, Snatch Gun. Someone says Jason likes Van Halen, so is Winger that much of a stretch? Damn, you guys are
stab.
Hey, I do. I like multi eras of Van Halen, and I do not hide it. Maybe that's why I'm single. Maybe women don't want to hear.
So you know what I've been listening to all day in honor of his death? The new Shellac album. Steve Albini.
Steve Albini, yeah. I didn't know you were. Well, I just should have known.
You should have known. Anything angry and hateful, I'm gonna like. Like,
Conan was cool with those cats, and Shellac got us into those. I think it was like the 25th or 30th anniversary shows for Neurosis in San Francisco. They played a week of shows in San Francisco, and
that was before one of the people in Neurosis was canceled.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that was a few years before. I think this was 2018 when they did that, and they had Converge open one night, Shellac open another night, and Sleep open another night.
Neurosis and Shellac would be weird, actually.
Like, Albini did all those records. He did all those records. Oh, people were. It was a weird crowd because people wanted to hear Neurosis. It was like Neurosis was playing a long set, but the audience. I've never seen an audience like this at a show that large. All bands. It was people that I knew from the scene. The Mastodon people had flown in to watch it. Big band people came in. Some of the Faith No More homies were there watching the show. Like it was nuts. It was nuts.
Oh man, I do love me some Mastodon. I love me some Southern stoner metal, but
they are some of the coolest. I'll end with this true life Mastodon story. I was touring with a band in 2009, and our tour had hit El Paso. And if you know Texas, El Paso and Las Cruces are right next to each other.
Yep.
It's the radio station. They don't have one in each city. There's one station that does both areas. And the band had done a radio station show, and they had moved the venue last minute. And it was like the official after party for AC/DC. We'll have the Last Nova. So the band was playing this thing, and the radio DJ just happened to show up. That had been promoting this after party, and he was like, "Hey, you guys are cool. Tomorrow, I'm doing this meet and greet thing with Mastodon in Las Cruces at this arena."
Mm-hmm.
And the tour was Mastodon, Converge, High on Fire, and Metalocalypse. So the cartoon.
Yeah, but I kind of really like that band. Like
no, they're dope. They're hella dope. They're hella dope, and their live show is actually kind of fun. So he goes, come to this meet and greet thing, and I'll get you guys into the show later because we had a day off. So we went, and Mastodon does the meet and greet with the fans, and once they were done, the DJ goes, "Hey, these are these guys from California. They're on tour too. They just did blah 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 blah," and so they were just super nice, right? They were like, "Hey." Troy from Mastodon goes, "Hey, Jason," because we were talking, he goes, "Jason, come get me after the show and we'll fucking hang." And their tour was going to Vegas the next night, and our tour was going to Vegas the next night. He goes, "Just come, we'll hang, and then we'll all go to Vegas and we'll all hang out." And so we go to the show. We had our little passes to get in, but we didn't have backstage passes.
Mm-hmm.
And Troy was like, just say, you're looking for Troy. It's all good. And I was telling the security guard, I was like, "Hey man, this is going to sound crazy. I know, but just tell Troy, Jason, and the Nova guys are outside." And he's like, "No, I'm not doing that." I was like, "Please." Finally the guy goes, "Fine." And he goes, and Troy comes out, "Jay, what's up?" Gets us all backstage. And they knew what it was like because at this point they're in a bus, you get a budget for stuff. And so we were not in the bus. We didn't have a big budget. So all the shit that they had in their backstage, they were like, "Look, anything you guys need right now, just take it. We don't even need this shit anymore. You guys need food, take all the catering shit. You guys need showers. It's all open. It's all good." So fucking nice. We did go to Vegas. I don't remember if we saw it because I don't remember that much about Vegas. It's actually where I met my ex. And then we ended up like partying with them at Tommy Lee's club and shit. So super duper, some of the nicest, coolest motherfuckers in show business. You will never hear too many bad words about.
You don't hear much bad about Mastodon. You don't hear much bad about Baroness. You don't hear a lot of bad about most of the Georgia metal scene, honestly. Like,
I haven't heard anything bad about this. There's Baroness from South Georgia. They're from
Savannah, and Mastodon's from Atlanta, but still, like, I'm definitely a partisan of the Georgia music scene because I'm a partisan of the Georgia music scene. Like, we gotta break New York and California hegemony somehow.
Everyone I've ever dealt with in Georgia has been super, super fucking cool. I have nothing but respect for. I got to play. What is the big room that had the 3 levels? The Masquerade.
Oh my fuck! I haven't thought about the Masquerade in 20 years, Jason.
There might be a Masquerade poster behind me somewhere. I don't know. We got to play the Masquerade when we came off that Godflesh tour. So.
I have been to like when I was from age 15 to age 30. That was like the venue we ended up at the most was the Masquerade because there's so many concerts going through there.
It's so dope. Did you ever go see the Chariot live?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck yeah. So yeah, I that was one of those things in your musical career that you check off a list.
You played the Masquerade. Which level did you play?
Oh, Purgatory. We were at the bottom.
I was gonna say you were in Purgatory. But still, I've never played Purgatory, Jason Myles, so you still beat me.
You know, when you see your name, we were the only band playing that night. So, you know, you see your name on the marquee and you're like, oh shit. And there's people coming up to you after the show with your poster. They want you to sign it.
If we have made it as a podcast, if we do a show in Purgatory as a podcast, would that just signal the apocalypse that we've completely destroyed the music industry and now talking fucking knockoff talk radio has replaced it? Like,
the sad thing is, Varn, and you know this is true. We wouldn't be in Purgatory. We'd probably be in hell.
Yeah, you're right. Actually,
we'd be in hell, and it would. Yeah.
I went to a major hardcore festival this weekend, and there was like, it was Crucial Fest here in SLC.
I know. Yes.
And one of my friends was actually singing in a reunion for a Provo metal band called Parallax. But the lead singer's been dead since like 20 years ago. But they revived for the Crucial Fest. But anyway, the weird thing about Crucial Fest, which actually told me, something about SLC. About the weird state of the SLC music scene is like the audience was either below 17 or over 35.
I was gonna say 47.
I was not old. I thought I was gonna be fucking old there, and I was not at all. I was like, shit. It was either kids. Or it was, and some people were clearly bringing their kids to like, I will instantiate you with the power of hardcore, child. I'm like, you just made this not cool, but whatever.
I think that's dope.
I love seeing kids at shows, man. I actually love it when we have all ages shows, and like even there was alcohol there, but it was cordoned off. You know,
yes, you got it costs a little more money for security. I told you about the scene here, and what I've been able to see here has just been kind of mind-blowing for me, again, because space costs so much money, insurance costs so much money, underage drinking is a massive problem at music shows. I give a damn what the genre is. So there's always a lockdown on anything all ages, and to see it being so encouraged in a place is dope to me. So I know I actually forgot about that fest. I want to say some people I know played that festival.
It was of varying quality, but and I will tell you, it made me feel old because like I've gone to a lot of concerts recently, and I realized that my taste is probably frozen about 10 years ago because I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are. But then I went to like this emo reunion tour because a fan of my show. Oh fuck! It's a emo band, 2 emo bands that released a fucking album 10 years ago, and I'd never heard of either one of them because it happened when I was out of the country. It was
10 years ago. Oh, it wasn't. Because some friends of mine are going back out on tour for a 20-year emo thing. Under Oath is going back out.
Yeah, I know. I would know that band. Emo from 20 years ago, I know. Emo from 10 years ago, I do not.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can figure out who it was.
10 years ago, who would have had it? It was an emo, like super emo, hardcore kind of hot topic.
No, like more radio friendly emo. Although I don't think of the bands as radio friendly.
Who could that have been?
Let me see. I'm trying to figure it out.
Nuri Yank says, "Who and what the fuck is a sleep token?" I Nuri Yank, to your point, I didn't know what a sleep token was, and they had showed up on a remix for a young band that I really dig called Loathe. And so I was like, what's a sleep token? Much like you. Didn't get it. And there's a cat that watches the show that's a big metalhead, and we talk. And I was asking him, I was like, what's a sleep token? He goes, dude, it's just pop music with breakdown.
Oh, it's the hotelier. It was the hotelier. The hoteliers. The hotelier.
Never heard of them. I'm not saying, hey, hoteliers. I'm not trying to say that like, fuck you. I just haven't heard of you because I'm.
It was a huge. The thing is, it was a weirdly huge. It was the biggest gig I've been to in town. And it was young, but in general, when I go to shows now, it's very young people, it's Zoomers, and it's Gen Xers, like, and older millennials. There's nobody in their 20s, their early 30s there. Like, it's very much like very young people and middle-aged people. And it's just weird because I don't remember that when I used to go to shows in the 90s. Yeah. Like, it was there'd be like two old guys and then like all young people and 20-year-olds.
It was just your fucking peers.
Right. Yeah.
No, not anymore.
Not anymore at all.
You know why? Young people don't dig shows like doing.
Do they dig socializing at all? Do they? I mean, anyway, we've had this conversation.
No, this is what I think. Doing something not at a level of, like, when you and I did bands and anything musical, or you did a poetry reading, there might not be people showing up. You might play in front of maybe 4 or 5 of your friends, maybe.
Yeah, no, I used to do poetry readings to like 10 people. Yeah,
I don't think there's so much at risk now for people that
because it might be recorded and all this. Yeah, it makes sense.
Look at your show, no one showed up, or look at you sucked. So there's a different.
I mean, shows are expensive, although it's hard for me to believe that $25 is going to price people out of a show. But
there's still places that do shit for $5 fucking. There's still places, there's still bars that are like, yeah, we can still do music. You can come here and make noise, even if you're not that good. Fill out a time slot, right? But and not pre-sale places. That being said, younger people doing stuff just to do it, it's a little different. I think it's a little harder for them to feel comfortable not being famous.
Yeah, Quinn says he can tell us why. Because they cost any money at all. Well, I mean, yeah,
because they cost any money.
The thing is, though, in SLC we have a lot of free shows. Like there's like legitimately a lot of free shows in the Greater Valley area, particularly if you're willing to drive to Ogden. And I don't see a lot of people at them either. So it's, even when they're bigger bands, and I mean, I'm in SLC, so like sometimes people skip us between the West Coast and Denver. Sometimes they don't, but every now and then they're like, you have to drive to Boise, and I'm like, fuck you, I'm not driving to Boise for anything.
How far is that from 4 hours?
Yeah, it's not actually that far. Like,
is it 4 hours from? I don't remember.
I just don't know why you pick Boise over SLC, like, because SLC is a bigger city.
Boise had a bigger population.
No, it doesn't. I
was signed to a label out of Boise, so we had to play Boise at least 3 times a year. And I actually have very, very, got to be close with other people that were on the label and just the Boise scene in general. I fucking loved Boise.
I like Boise a lot.
Utah were pretty fun places to play if you could get in the right spots. I haven't been to Boise. God, what year is it? 2019 was the last time I was in Boise, but I will admit I missed that place.
Is Boise as dry as SLC? SLC proper is not as dry anymore as it used to be. Our liquor laws changed in the last 10 years. It's still relatively dry to like whatever drunken place you come from, but like it's a little bit less theocratic than it used to be. That said, outside of SLC, whew.
I mean, David Epps is from one of those places too, where there's Chicago, and if you're a small band, you're playing all that little shit in Wisconsin next to Chicago, Milwaukee, Kenosha, Racine.
Well, the thing is about Utah is there's 3 cities, but they're all right by each other, like Ogden, Provo, every. Like the biggest city that's of any distance away is in the north, it's Logan, that's at the border of Idaho, and then the south is St. George, which is at the border of Nevada, right on the Grand Canyon. But like if there's no reason for you to play multiple Utah cities. Like you're either going to come to Ogden, you're going to come to Salt Lake, or you're going to come to Provo. You're not going to come to any of it.
You're going to play one city there, and then you're going to keep it moving to either Vegas if you're going south, or Boise if you're going north, or
Boise if you're going north, or Denver if you're going east.
Denver, yeah. And Denver is not the most fun place to play because it's like a proper big city.
Yeah, no. SLC is like we're a massive metropolitan area, but we don't feel like it. like it's we're like the mid-sized city that could. Although, like, don't try to buy a house here because you can't fucking afford it. But well, I shouldn't say that to someone from California, but still.
Look, dude, we just went. A buddy of mine who lives here. He, when you live in libertarian California, lease agreements be damned. And my buddy had signed a year lease at a place, and it's about to be tourist season, so they went up to him. Yeah, they're like, "Hey, we need you out by this date." And he was like, "Well, fuck it, I'll leave, next week." So he's trying to come back this way, and we looked at a place that's 100 less than mine, and it was fucking gorgeous. And when you look at some of these places, you're like, I just can't come back across that imaginary line. I just can't.
I told you where I'm going to retire to. My ass is retiring to southern Mexico, and you guys can come find me. Good luck.
And I found out getting there from here in state, like $50.
Oh wow.
They have a whole new plane thing here where they're trying to encourage in-state travel, so it's like super affordable.
The bus system in Mexico is also pretty good as long as you stay off the chicken bus, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no,
don't go on the chicken bus.
I am going to take my.
You going to take the chicken bus?
No, no. We will be taking a bus to TJ with one of our mutual podcast friends this weekend.
I might be traveling down to San Diego and with my partner this summer. It's no promises yet. Knock, knock, knock.
Dude,
but if we do, we'll hop over to the Rosarito. We will. We've actually we've talked other people to moving to Rosarito who couldn't afford to live in San Diego.
Was somebody had hit me up going, "Hey, I think I know Derick Varn, and what's it like living out there? And what do you do?" Yeah.
No. I've also put like some people who have nothing to do with the podcast circle where I've been like, hey, like you're living in an RV in San Diego, you can go get an apartment in TJ or Rosarito. Like,
well, don't say that anymore. It's violent here. Don't come here. We don't want you. You can't drink the water. The cartel's everywhere, and they snatch up old white people. So just go away.
Jason's worried about his rent. All right. Look, as a person who lived in cartel country, way more cartel country than where you live.
Yeah.
I loved it. Like, yeah, you just had to avoid certain things, and don't buy drugs.
Another reason I'm so boring around here. They don't see me doing anything outside of normal bullshit because I'm not trying to get any weird knocks on my fucking door. No. Look, we've been bullshitting for too long. Thank you, Derick, for hanging out with me. Thank you.
I'm gonna go watch Shin Godzilla. That's what I'm gonna go do.
Can you watch Party Line on Tubi with your partner? Because I want you guys to give me your analysis of this.
I probably can't tonight, but I can this weekend. You know what? I'm gonna add that to my weekend agenda, and we can come back and I'll talk to you about Party Line.
I want to get a message from you about this film. And if anybody else watches Party Line on Tubi from 1988, starring the one and only, the late Leif Garrett, let me know what you think about it. Because, man, it was odd. Someone says they're going to rewind the platypus parts of the show.
Oh, God.
Our countdown of fucking hangs is coming up. I'm so stoked about this. We get to hang in DC.
Yeah, we get to hang in this in less than in basically 9 days. In 9 days, we're going to hang out. And I'm going to meet Adolf Reed for the first time in my life. So I'm excited.
My first time meeting him in person as well.
I haven't met him at all. Like, not even.
Oh, okay. So this will be really. Yeah, I know Pascal's really stoked for meeting him in person, and
like,
the only way I could get a ticket is if I stayed till Tuesday.
So you're staying till Tuesday?
Yeah. So I'm
staying till Monday.
I might go see Prescott in Philly because I think it's just like a quick train. Or
Philly's. Here's the one thing I'll say about DC. It's one of the few places in the U.S. where the buses and trains are good, and you can go to Philly, you can go to New York, you can go to Pittsburgh real easy. You can go to Maryland. I mean, like, it's not hard. Like, unlike out here in the West where our public transit fucking sucks, but, you know, it's not so bad if you're in the DC corridor in the tri-state area.
Isn't Leif Garrett alive? I swear Leif Garrett died not too long ago. Didn't he die not too long ago?
I don't know, man. Why do I? Okay, am I Leif Garrett's keeper? Let's find out.
You don't have Leif Garrett fucking info?
Leif Garrett is alive.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm fucking wishing ill. Oh, did the guy die that was in the wheelchair that he paralyzed? Did that guy die?
Yeah, I believe that guy did die.
Maybe that's who died. You saved my life that night, man. Remember when Family Guy Perry did that?
Apparently, he's in a lot of legal troubles. Been narcotics, but even that's 10 years old. So who knows?
Okay, maybe he's gotten his life back together again. But this movie, he is knee deep in his addiction, and this is how Derick and I are leaving the show tonight with the greatest man ever. He's on
Roddy Piper?
No, this is Ric Flair.
Oh, the other greatest man ever.
Leif Garrett is back from the dead.
We can only be serious for about an hour and a half. We do a 3-hour show, and the first half is business, and we're like the mullet of podcasting.
We are the mullet. Hey, the mullet of podcasting.
Business in the front, party in the back. Like,
you got your business in the front end of the show, you get your party in the back end of the show. Is that a fair assessment? Okay, there's a person in the kitchen that is nodding. Yes, it is a fair assessment. Okay, now, just so you know who the fuck me and Derick are,